retired, Arune Rumney graduated as a Doctor of Medicine in New York and then embarked on a 12-month travelling adventure, ending up in Australia where she studied psychiatry. As a Hindu Indian with her family's support, she and her husband Clive adopted an Indian child, Usha, who has now begun her own family. Like her adoptive father, Usha decided to become a secondary school teacher, specialising in business management.
45 years ago, there were not that many Indians in Australia. That started only about 25 years ago. So at the time, it was quite unusual to be walking down the street to see anything other than an Anglo-Saxon kind of face.
There's a generational difference between you and Arune and how things have gone for you both. Do you want to maintain that Indian roots for your family as well?
Like, there's still Indian celebrations that we have every year, and so I want my kids to be doing that. And it was important to us that all of our children were blessed at the temple, because I still go to temple, even though we're not like a very, very religious family. I still go, and so I wanted all of our children to be blessed there. I still see myself as Indian, but I mean, a lot of my friends say that I'm more Aussie than them in some ways, because I grew up here, and so I'm completely and totally immersed in this culture. And I didn't grow up with the same, I guess, cultural pressures of growing up in India, so I didn't have that at all, and so that hasn't passed on to me or continued with me at all.
You've married an Australian Anglo-Saxon white boy, and you're having a family with him.
Yeah.
So, was that ever a question for you when you got married?
Not really, because I mean, Dad wasn't Indian either, so that sort of stopped with Mum. If Mum had married an Indian person, then and those traditions had continued, then there might have been pressure, but I think
so never a question.
No question around it. It was just, choose someone who's a good person and who you love.
Do you look at your mum for anything that's Indian cultural heritage for you? No, maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
You do?
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah.
I'm a very poor role model in that respect. I have to consult with friends and family,
yeah,
to kind of give me some sense of direction or some ideas to kind of how to proceed. I mean, she'll usually come up with the idea, and then I kind of scramble around trying to get the kind of information and to set up whatever it is that she wants to have done.
Have you ever felt different, or so you have felt different, but has that been a negative thing for you ever?
When I was at school, and I've said this before to a lot of people, in primary school and high school, I was fully convinced that I was a white Anglo-Saxon person.
I don't believe I've really ever been challenged by the fact that I come from a different ethnic and cultural and religious background. I suppose, I presented myself as who I was, absolutely no kind of excuses or explanations for it, and people accepted it. So that's the way it was, and that's the way it remains. Yes.
As a teacher and at a school where students come from pretty challenging and different backgrounds, I look at my classroom now and it is totally diverse, and there's not one majority. And the white Anglo-Saxon face is a minority in that classroom. So I think that's really interesting. But I suppose with my own background, that has meant that I have an understanding of the different cultures that are in my classroom, and I'm aware of what their pressures might be, or the the cultural factors that are coming through for those children. I've had students over the years who have who knew that I understood where they were coming from because of their cultural background. So whether they came from a Somalian and Muslim background, or whether they were Indian themselves, or even at one of my first schools, there was a lot of Chinese and Asian families. I had a greater awareness, I suppose, of what their cultural pressures were. So I think that definitely helped in terms of a connection with them. And when they had their struggles, it was something that I could help them through and could work with them.
If you look forward another 10 years now, where do you see this whole issue around cultural diversity going in the next 10 years?
I can only see positive things in it. I suppose I would wish for some greater levels of acceptance and tolerance within, in between different communities. There are still some barriers there that need to be kind of addressed and broken down. But I think within the general population, I think there's a growing willingness for people from different ethnic, religious and cultural backgrounds to explore those differences and to learn from them and to be able to overcome whatever difficulties those differences are generating now. I think community leaders and politicians and teachers and people in positions of power and authority need to be a bit more considerate of the language that they use around difficulties that different ethnic groups have.
There are large organisations that could bring about great change to people's perspectives because they have such a large audience. And so, so for example, with the AFL, they've introduced things like the Indigenous round to bring awareness about, Indigenous players. And they have the multicultural round where they celebrate different cultures based on, players' ethnicities. So those are the types of things. Those organisations have a lot of power to bring about positive change in our community and shouldn't be too scared to step in and have a voice and embrace it, or the fear of criticism, or feeling tied to a political agenda because there's financial gain for them.
What's Australia going to look like in 2028? Is it more of the same? Just more?
I think we're very fortunate living in this country and in this society and in this culture. I think we are kind of, to some extent, insulated from some of the difficulties in the Northern Hemisphere and in, for example, the African continent and the South American continent. And I think we should take advantage of that and push forward and continue to be an example to the rest of the world. And we have the opportunity to do that. It's just that we need the willingness and the determination to forge ahead fearlessly.
I mean, I still look at Australia and think it's the lucky country, because I think we are really, really lucky, and there's a lot to be grateful for here.